needed to manage diverse technical systems, projects, and people. Created specifically for busy engineering professionals like you, this fully online program takes only 2 years to complete. See the links provided in the description in the YouTube channel below for more information. And today, before we begin our thing, remember to subscribe to the chat on the YouTube channel so you can participate and ask questions for Joe and David today. So welcome, Joe and David. David, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm? David?
Well, I moved to California in early 1981 after graduating from Virginia Tech, and I went to work immediately for Degenkolb Engineers in San Francisco. I moved my family to Southern California in 1995 to open up Degenkolb's Southern California office after the Northridge earthquake, which was quite an experience. I left Degenkolb and founded Structural Focus in 2001. And we now have a couple of dozen people on our staff, and we're doing the kind of work that we like to do. It's historic preservation, lots of adaptive reuse, as well as ground up design for film studios and tech firms like Netflix, Google, YouTube, Sony, and others. Probably the other interesting fact is my wife, Kate, works with me. She's the CFO of the firm. So we are together 24 hours a day. So it's just lots of fun.
Thank you, David. Now, Joe, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm?
Sure. I am in New Jersey and have been in Northern New Jersey my whole life. I founded Structural Workshop almost 17 years ago, and we are currently a 12-person firm, and we do pretty much everything. It's easier to describe what we don't do, which is highway bridges and high rises. But other than that, we've done just about every conceivable type of project, type of building, and type of material you could imagine. So
it's great. So why don't we start the conversation today before everybody answers some questions on the chat with about some leadership and the pandemic effect on your leadership, and has it changed anything the way you deal with your staff and your clients in the virtual world? David, do you want to start?
Sure. There's obviously our world has changed, and maybe I'll talk about the association, the Institute first. When I was president, which is now, I finished just over a year ago, during my entire office, there was like a template in place. We knew where the touch points were going to be for our membership at Structures Congress and other events. And it was really a very set plan for what was going to happen. I had the advantage that we'd done it before. We didn't have to rethink it. And we didn't have to take as many proactive steps to get to our members because they were always happening in meetings and conference calls and everything else. I also had a fun advantage that I got to go on great trips. I got to travel around the country. Laura and I and a few others went to London for an event with iStructE. And then just about exactly a year ago, we were in Dubai for our conference with iStructE. So it really was a fantastic opportunity for me there. Joe's going to have a different world, obviously, because for one thing, there's no travel. So I don't know, Joe, what do you got any ideas about that? We can talk about our firms too, but that to me was a big deal.
I think I have it relatively easy. Glenn is the one who had the hard time. I tomorrow will be the 1-week anniversary of my term. So, obviously I knew prepping for it, and I knew going in what it was going to be, and that's mostly to all virtual. There's certainly the foreseeable future. Everything we're going to be doing is virtual. There is some hope that the second half of my term we can have some in-person events again, but you never know. So we're proceeding at least on that path for now. Glenn, he started like you just described, David, right. And then in the middle of his term, he had to go from that to what I just said, and every day was kind of a new story and a little different. And at least I have an idea of what I'm getting into, as you did. But poor Glenn in between us, not so much.
Well, I remember 6 months ago, Glenn came to us, you and me and Laura and some others, and said, I've got 6 months left in my term. What can I do to make a difference? Because all his other plans were they'd gone a little haywire. You know,
He was heavy on visiting local chapters, was one of the things he wanted to really do, which was a poor choice for last year.
Yeah, it was. He came up with his mentoring program, which has been fantastic for young professionals. But you know, he really did have to make a 90-degree turn right in the middle of his term.
So how's it affecting also, now that was our professional society dealing, how is it dealing with your employees and your clients? And do you have any tips to give the audience about things that you learned working in the virtual world?
You want me to go first, or Joe, you want to go first?
I'll go. I think flexibility has been very important. Leadership of knowing where you want to go and knowing what your goals are and where the finish line is and what you're trying to accomplish, that's firm. You know, we know what we want to do, but getting there is not a straight path anymore. It's every day, and not so much now. Things have stabilized a bit, obviously, but during the height of the pandemic, every day was an adventure of new guidance, new rules, new planning. All employees have varying levels of comfort with different things. So there's not a one size fits all, everybody home or everybody back to the office or everybody do it in a certain way. So, you know, luckily David and I's firms are both small enough where I think we're still kind of in the weeds of things enough, and we can kind of customize things, and we know our employees and can kind of give them what they need that also works for us. But you know, every day was new guidance, new plans, new path to get to the same place. But flexibility was the most important thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had about a year ago, we had a young employee ask if he could work remotely from the Bay Area. And we were like, I don't know if this is going to work. And now it's the norm, you know. We have tried, since we've all been working remotely, to reach out and do some fun stuff, even though it's done remotely. One of our young engineers has been organizing a weekly virtual happy hour, and he sends out trivia questions every day. And that's a lot of fun. We've sent out gifts to the staff. We got sweatpants with a logo on them. We sent out kind of early in the thing, say, be comfortable while you're working.
That's a good one.
We had to cancel our annual cookout. So we ordered picnic backpacks, you know, with all the gear and a logo on it, and sent that out to all the families. So he said, well, at least go have a picnic on us. So trying to be creative. At the project level, though, it's been more difficult. It really forces us to try to have more regular meetings, because we're not seeing our staff on a day-to-day basis. So the project managers have to be a lot more on top of things to make sure that things are happening when they're supposed to be happening. So that's been a little bit more difficult.
So David, you said after this chat, you were going to go out to a site visit. So how's that changed working, the challenges of going to site visit with all the constraints and everything, and the traveling with you personally and with your staff too?
Well, the good news is that traffic is way down. So
yeah, that's true.
In LA, it was a minimum of an hour to get anywhere. My site visit right now is 21 minutes away. It normally would be an hour. If it's a construction site, obviously there's all the protocols you have to go through, and they're taking your temperature and checking all kinds of things before they even let you on the site. I'm going to look at an existing building, so there's going to be 6 or 8 of us there, and we're going to all be masked up and trying to stay away from each other. And so it's really not that difficult to do it. We have told our staff if they're not comfortable to let us know, or if it's an uncomfortable situation they get into, then get out of there. You know, there's no sense taking any unnecessary risks.
We have a email we send out for all of our site visits, just explaining what our preferred, well, we don't call them preferred, but you'll soon see why I just said preferred, but what our protocols are. Basically, you know, stay 10 feet away. The engineer will sanitize his hands when he gets out of the car, and but walk with a wipe. So anything we touch with a disinfecting wipe, and basically stay the heck away from us. And if you can stay outside while we do our thing, we'll come talk to you outside when we're done. Right. And some things like that. And it's amazing the variety of responses, not responses in the email, but when you show up, I mean, there's some people who are masked head to toe and don't come within 20 feet of you. And there's others where there's 10 people inside in a room and they're in your face and it's like, you know, nothing's going on, and everything in between. So you kind of have to adjust on the fly to, I'm big on just staying as far away as I possibly can from people. That's kind of my number one way to deal with this. Masks and everything else aside, I just try to stay 10, 15 feet away from everybody at all times and not stay in a room with people for too long and all that stuff. And some people just seem completely oblivious to it, and others seem too scared to even go out. There's very little middle ground, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
We have one question come up for you guys. So this is back to about the virtual versus the in-person meetings. The question is, when we are back to in-person events, any thoughts on how we can continue the virtual inclusivity for those where traveling still may be a barrier?
I think it's going to be an advantage, frankly. I mean, there's nothing like in person. You know, I love a design charrette, for instance. Get a bunch of people in the room and, you know, all the different disciplines and start working on a problem together. But that's not going to be the reality always. And I think people now are so used to virtual meetings that we're going to be, especially the clients, are going to be more understanding if you can't make it for whatever reason. So I don't believe that we're going to do everything 100% virtually, and I don't believe we're going to do everything 100% face-to-face. I think it's going to be a blend, and in many ways, it's going to be a lot more convenient and a lot more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll get back to some face-to-face things for the things that have to be face-to-face, but you know, a lot of these things, if you have to have a quick meeting on something, we've been trying for years to use some of these collaboration and screen sharing software and other things just to be more efficient.
Right.
You know, now it's much more adopted. So, I mean, if I can just jump on a half an hour Zoom with somebody and save myself an hour trip somewhere, an hour long meeting and an hour trip back, that's and an interruption in my day. That is a tremendous time saver. So I think I agree with David that we'll see a little bit of both, and there'll probably be some events that are similar to what some of the schools are doing now, where there's live instruction, but it's also streamed for those that are home. Right. You know, I have 3 kids in 3 different schools because of their ages. I have a high schooler, middle schooler, and an elementary schooler, and they're all on different schedules, which is its own nightmare for my wife. But one of them is on a hybrid kind of thing, where they have half the class in for in-person instruction, the other half stays home that day and watches the same thing on the screen, which is what I think some of this will be like that. Everyone that can make it or needs to make it comes in person, and then the other people can just watch it.
Right.
Yeah, and there's like new skills we have to learn. Right now, I'm reading off my 20-point font so that I'm looking into the camera. So are there any other skills that you would recommend that you're to develop for your employees now that we're going to be going into this hybrid virtual world?
I can't think of technical skills per se, but I will say that Self-motivation and self-discipline is going to be incredibly important. It is important right now because it's too easy to, when you're by yourself, it's too easy to get lazy. And, that is one thing that I really think is going to make a difference. What I can tell is our high quality people are shining right now, and it's obvious, even though we're not face to face. So, if I constantly having to remind somebody to do something, then that means that they're not really stepping up. Obviously, communications is very, very important, and that means all methods of communication as well as being a good communicator. So that's all I can think of.
Yeah, I think we like to hire people that we can just give them what needs to be done and when it needs to be done by, and not hold their hand and not punch a clock in and out, and I think the types of people that we generally like to have to begin with will thrive in this environment because they can stay motivated, they can stay on task. And this is a very general comment, not even specific to our industry, but people that start doing other things on their other screen or start going on social media and just can't stay focused. There's so many distractions if you're home, especially if you're pets, kids. It's very easy if you're not a person that naturally can do that to fall behind. So I think the people that can successfully do that are going to do much better going forward.
I agree.
Yeah, it's easy to relate. I live by myself and I get distracted all the time. I can't imagine with you, Joe, with your family and everything.
Especially when you're on a computer screen. You're just a click away from, doing anything on the internet. Just click on something and you're if you're easily distracted, you're lost for half an hour in that. So.
Right.
Yeah. So, trying to develop your staff in this kind of, even in the next 6 months or the year for the, the new year, the 2021, what kind of professional development skills are you thinking that your staff's going to be needing, and are you encouraging to do in this sort of remote virtual world we're in right now?
Joe, you want to go? Or you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead. You go first this time.
Well, we've always been making a lot of webinars available to our staff. The hardest part about that, obviously everybody's doing webinars, everybody's doing virtual conferences. The hardest part is just organizing that and knowing who's doing what. And if we wanted them to do it as a group, how do we do that? What are the logistics and all that stuff? So that's one thing. But recently we have begun to realize more that all the in-house training that we used to do live in, everybody get together in the conference room, we need to pick that back up again and start doing that again. We weren't doing as much of that. And now we're realizing that, why did we stop? We should continue to do that virtually like we're doing everything else. We're also just, you asked if there's other things to focus on. We've had some people go out and find training specifically that they would like to look into. Like we had a couple of our project engineers find this, Anthony's class about project management. And so they've signed up for that. They did that. It was virtual. And, we don't even know, I didn't have them report to me every day about how it was going, but all of a sudden it was done and they're going, hey, what a great class this was. So I think it's an opportunity it's an opportunity for training because people do have they might have some extra time at home because they're not commuting. So it might be a good time to pick up some of that extra training.
And I typically used to get as many or to all of my credits at Structures Congress, which was nice because I was there anyway for other stuff usually, and I could get as close as I could to the credits I needed. But obviously with that being that not happening, it's been a bit of a scramble. I have signed up for a bunch of ASC classes. I just haven't gotten to them yet. But in the office, we've had a couple lunch and learns remotely. We've had a few where we've had few people in the office watching a remote one, and we've also had them completely remote, where everyone's remote and the instructor's remote. That is easier to do, and probably less of a hassle and less time consuming. And as David said, if people are usually leaving at 5 to drive home in California traffic till 7, then they can watch the video from 5 to 6, pick up an hour, and continue again and be home by 6:30. So there's more, more flexibility, more efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll do the non-commercial plug to remember, if you're ASE member, you get to have the 10 free PDHs as part of our member benefits. So those expire at the end of the calendar year this year. So I know that I have 2. Joe downloaded a whole bunch of them, and I still need to take some of them before the end of the year. So I just want to remind everybody who's listening to us to submit some questions in the YouTube chat so that we can ask anything to Joe and David while they're alive here. So I want to switch a little bit to focus a little bit on students and sort of just ask some questions about what do you see as the outlook for structural engineers in general, and especially for students.
Okay, I'll go first. I think in the beginning of this year was probably the hottest job market I've ever seen. We tried to get drafters, we tried to get engineers, and for the most part, any resumes that came in, there was a reason that the people were looking for a job, because anyone who was even remotely qualified was employed. And it was very, very, very hard. We were having a problem with not being able to get the right staff or enough staff to get the work done. So it was a booming economy and a booming job market. And it slowed down a little bit, but not much. But the job market definitely has softened a bit. I think a lot of larger companies had, kind of mass layoffs where they just had to cut numbers without real regard to picking and choosing who would go. That allowed us to make a really nice hire recently, a very senior guy who was at a big firm, and under normal circumstances would not have lost his job. He's quite qualified. So in that sense, it helped us. We were able to finally get staff to where we needed to be. And the workload really, there certainly was a lull in some things and a lull in cash flow and other things. But the global picture as of now, if anything, it's even starting to pick up now. I was getting worried about the pipeline, but we're starting to get some good sized new projects in. People are still spending money. So my worries are about a more general economic recession. But as far as the development and construction in the Northeast goes, we're doing fantastic right now.
So David, what's the West Coast look like?
I don't know if I would say fantastic, but I do think the speculative market, obviously offices, they don't really know yet what they're looking at. So all these speculative office projects are slowing down, or I should say taking longer to kick off. We're pretty lucky that there's a couple of reasons that I'm optimistic for the long view, at least in California. And one of them is the emphasis on seismic retrofitting. There's a lot of the jurisdictions are passing mandatory retrofit ordinances for seismic. So that's a really good sign for us. And we do a lot of retrofit design. There are also some for us. We just happen to be working in the markets of the businesses that are doing very well in the pandemic environment, and that's entertainment and tech. They're both spending a lot of money, and so we have a lot of projects related to those industries. So that's been very good. The institutions, I think, are they're being a little bit more careful right now. So I think overall, in the long term, we've still got a lot to look forward to. I think there's a little bit of a pause right now in the institutions. There's a little bit of a pause in the spec office buildings. The industrial market actually is doing great. Industrial and distribution those areas are doing very, very well. Again, that's part of the pandemic environment where there's a need for those kind of facilities. So I don't really know about multifamily housing, Joe. Here, that was super hot, and we never do it. So I don't know what it's like back there.
We have nothing going with office around here. We have a very saturated office building market. In the 80s and 90s, they built more office buildings in North Jersey than they'll ever need. But logistics and industrial is booming. We've even had inquiries about like two-story Class A type office buildings that are abandoned, taking out the floor and converting it into a 2-story open warehouse space for logistics. I mean, that's to me, the economics of that makes absolutely no sense, but people have been exploring things like that.
Yeah.
Multifamily housing, I'd say 80% of our design ground up projects that are going on right now are logistics, industrial, or multifamily housing, podium types of buildings, retail or parking underneath, 3-4 stories of wood apartments or condos above. And that hasn't really stopped. That seems to be what everyone's doing around here right now.
Yeah.
And things, there's been a major migration everywhere, but especially in the Northeast, back to the cities. Everybody moved out in the 60s and 70s to the suburbs, and everybody moved back to the cities over the past 15 years. And now they're all coming out of the cities to the suburbs. The real estate market in the New York City suburbs right now is insane. Houses are selling in 3 days for over asking, and the developers know this, so that they're putting their foot on the gas, if anything, for that multifamily stuff. So.
Yeah, same thing happening here.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, that's even in the DC area here, it's the suburban sprawl is even moving farther out of the city. So,
yeah.
So Joe, you mentioned that you had a new hire, and I don't know if you had any, David, but how did that work through the virtual environment? Did you a virtual interview? Do you have any recommendations for any students here that are listening about what you could do for
Joe,
going
you
to
actually,
a virtual interview?
You just went through it. We have not hired anybody in the last 6 months. I have my ideas, but Joe, you went through it. How'd you do it?
He came in for an in-person interview with my my number 2 guy, and I was not here for that. And then I did a Zoom call with him after that, which was fine. I probably would be a little more hesitant if all we did was a Zoom call. It was nice that at least somebody met him. So we did one virtual and one in-person interview. And I definitely would be a little hesitant doing all remote, though. I think at least you got to, to some degree, see the person.
All right, we have a question coming in about structural engineering education. Is in this pandemic, with all the flurry of the remote and the hybrid teaching, an opportunity for making changes to the way structural engineering education is delivered? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
can we sign them up for a committee that we have?
Go ahead, David. You can.
I think that again, it's kind of like our normal, like we were just talking a few minutes ago about the way we're conducting business. I think it's going to be hybrid for a while. And unfortunately, I think the students get the most out of group projects as opposed to any other thing they do, any of their other courses. And those group projects are now going to be virtual group projects for a while. Other than that, I don't know that I have any other thoughts about, the Institute, as you guys know, we do have a committee for looking at changes to the structural engineering education. And that is a big question, because the problem for that committee is they're projecting out 10, 15, 20 years, and what kind of education can we do now that's going to prepare for our structural engineering practice 10, 15, 20 years out there, which is all in our vision that we've been talking about.
I mean, the kids that are at universities now, so it's almost going to be an experiment to see how they come out, because they're, It is pretty easy to do a lecture and assign a homework assignment remotely. That's probably minimal to no loss there. If anything, it might be easier for them to get to class and pay attention. But yeah, the group stuff and the some of the other things you're going to lose out on. And I don't know how long that's going to go on for. I mean, the universities are in the same boat everybody else is. They're changing their plans every 3 days based on what's going on. And I think if anything, they're going to be one of the last to go back to totally normal, because I think a college setting is probably the absolute most difficult to contain this virus. So they may be like this for 2-3 years, which means you're going to have a class of kids coming out that's really had not a historically normal continuous path of education. And nobody knows how that's going to turn out.
I will say that we do have 2 interns working with us right now, and one of them started in the summer, and we didn't know if it was going to work. She's been, engaged in all of our happy hours and all that stuff. So people have gotten to know her a little bit, but still virtually. She started coming into the office 1 day a week. Today is her day to be in here. And so she's met, 3 or 4 or 5 of us face to face. And she's continuing now. Classes have started back up at UCLA, and she's working like 8 hours a week, and it's all virtual. So then we have another one that just started a few weeks ago, and pretty much the same deal. She's up at Cal Poly, and she's working about 8 hours a week, and it's all virtual. We knew her before. I had met her several times. So at least we had that personal contact, and we knew what we were getting. So it's all an experiment. We wanted to expose them as much as we could to a professional situation, just so they could touch it and feel it as much as possible.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier, David, how there's booming in seismic retrofit and everything, and that's, California with the West Coast with the high seismic and the structural engineering license, and you are particularly an SE. Mm-hmm. And then, Joe, you're from the East Coast in the PE, just kind of talking about what are your thoughts about the, where you see a future of structural licensing going? And that's, I know, is a hot topic with our members, and especially it's kind of good to get your opinion from the leadership from the East to West Coast.
I think there's pretty broad support for something. It's just a matter of what it is and how it works. That kind of is being discussed, but I think there's pretty broad support for something to elevate the profession and elevate the licensing of the profession.
Yeah, I will say, in California, legally, you don't have to have a structural license unless you're designing hospitals, public schools, and high rises in Los Angeles. Legally, you can, SE is not required. However, clients want a licensed structural engineering stamp on virtually every kind of project they do. They never, it's just a matter of course. If you want to do the kind of work that we do and our colleagues do, you're expected to have an SE license, even if you never stamp the drawings. Even if you're just you're going to be a staff engineer all your life and you're never going to be a principal, you're still expected to have an SE license. So and I think that the main reason for that is seismic. I think clients they've bought into the concept that you have to have an understanding because of the seismic issues. Right.
So we have another question that kind of related to diversity. So, SEI just formed, and the Board of Governors just authorized last week a new diversity and inclusion committee. And the question is, do you see more diversity in your firms or out in the workplace, especially women? But I'm just going to throw it out as a general conversation, and maybe we talk a little bit about the different diversity within the East and the West Coast.
You want me to go, Joe?
Go ahead.
I will say, I've been saying this for probably 6 or 8 years now, that probably out of all of the resumes we get we hire people with master's degrees. And the resumes that we get, probably 8 out of 10 best resumes we get in every 1 year are females. And so therefore our staff is, it's getting close. Well, in the engineering staff itself, it's probably 50-50-ish. I mean, it's right in there. And it's, there's no question about that there's high quality female candidates. We don't have any goals. We just look at who's the best engineers, who's the best fit for us. And it's just working out. We have a very high female population. The other diversity, other categories are more difficult. There's just not that many candidates that are out there, but we certainly don't want to turn them away because they're not in the right category or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we again, as David said, we just look to hire the best people, completely blind to everything else. And engineers wise, we generally look for master's degrees. Women is, I think in general has grown a little bit from where it was. Here we're a little more man-centered than women. We're not 50-50, but in terms of other diversity, we are extremely diverse. I mean, we have people from India, people from Egypt. We've had, I am the minority as a white male in my office. So that's kind of my yardstick that I'm practicing what I preach when I say we hire the best person regardless. So.
Yeah. We have to. I mean, to be able to compete, we have to hire the best people we can find.
Yeah. All right, so we're coming near the end, and I don't see any new questions in, so I'm going to kind of just ask you to kind of summarize is, what do you see as the most important lessons learned during this pandemic and moving forward?
I'll go first, I guess. This is such an unusual, obviously a crazy world we're in right now. And I think it's an opportunity. I've actually been Pollyannish about this and told people that engineers can kind of save the world right now, at least engineers and scientists. And, we're the kind of thinkers that are needed in the world right now with all the issues that we have. And so I think it's whatever specific part of science or engineering you want to jump into, you can play a great role in making this world a lot better, probably more than any other area. I think it's also that in these circumstances that we're working right now, the best people are the ones that are going to step up. You can see the best people, they're kind of self-identifying, I think. I do think frequent communications is super important. It's not necessarily, you don't have to have long conversations, but more communications more frequently is a big thing. Obviously training like we talked about. And then lastly, I would say that what's important right now in this world is empathy and being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, because everybody's having a tough time in one way or the other, emotionally, mentally. People on your staff, some people you may not know, they might be, really, I don't want to say depressed necessarily, but you need to realize that everybody's going through these cycles of emotions, and we need to be aware of that and do what we can. And that's again why frequent communications is a good idea. So those are, just some of my thoughts.
No, that was very, very well said. I mean, I don't have too much to add to that. I said before about the flexibility. I agree that we as engineers and trained problem solvers, I mean, that's what we do. And that's what they beat into our head in college and grad school, that you can't figure out why you have to do 600 math problems on something you're never going to use. But, when you spend all those years doing nothing but solving problems, it becomes second nature, and you start to look at everything as a problem to be solved. And we certainly have had our share of them this year. Every day brings a new set of problems, and you don't know what it's going to be sometimes till that day. And as I said, you just have to keep being flexible and navigating and being flexible with your employees. Everyone is handling this differently, dealing with it differently. Empathy is David's word for it, but I think that's tremendously important. That's it. Just keep your eye on the end goal. Just be prepared to have to make a lot of zigzags to get there. It's probably the best way I can put it.
So we have one last question that just is coming in, but right before the close of the half hour here, again, about the future of our profession and how you see the pandemic changing it. But could you be a little bit more specific? And if the question is such as in design and inspections and in actually the practice of structural engineering. Joe, do you want to start?
Say that one more time, Laura.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was final question was, how's the pandemic changing the future of our profession, more specifically targeting design and an inspection?
Well, I don't think much is going to change design-wise. I mean, I think architects and MEP engineers are going to be making some changes to how they design things, but I don't think the structures of the buildings are going to be affected too much by it. Inspection wise is similar to what I said before. I mean, we certainly should have protocols based on what is going on, and how keeping employees and people on site safe. But everyone kind of has a different take on what that means and how serious they are about it. So that's been a little difficult, but I don't see much. I see, other than having some more efficiency going forward by doing these things remote and using some of these tools that everybody was forced to learn, I don't see 5 years from now, and this is a distant memory, hopefully, I don't see things being too much different because of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if anything, this has taught us that there is technology that can help us with communicating, and so the inspections, people are a little bit more tolerant of having the contractor take a video or take photos or walking around, showing the conditions. People have become more tolerant to that. So that's
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I have to ask, do you think the courts are going to be more tolerant when they ask you about your standard of care for taking the video rather than going to the site?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope the courts realize the world we're in right now when they come time to asking that question. So I don't know. Good one.
Put that on the agenda for the next SEI Live.
All right, standard of care. Well, I want to thank both you, David and Joe, and everyone here that joined us today. Our next virtual event is the final session on the Career Path series that's hosted by the SEI past president directly of 2020, Glenn Bell, and that's going to be on October 20th. To check out the program, the registration is still open, but space is limited. So register today on the SEI virtual event homepage on our website. Again, I also want to thank to California State University at Northridge, who are sponsoring today's SEI live chat. Please check out their programs at go.csun.edu/EM. They also have a really nice video on all of our social media outlets, so go check that little video that they have up there to promote California State University at Northridge. Thank you again. So thank you, David, Joe, everybody, members and non-members, for joining us at SEI Live Chat. And our next one's coming up in November. Thank you, and everybody stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.